Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Gold Silver Bitcoin Show brought to you by the GoldSilverBitcoin.com store. We're more than honored to be sitting down today with Chris Marcus of Arcadia Economics, a show on YouTube that I've known about and watched here and there for, I think, I have no idea, actually, 7 years, 10 years, 5 years, something like that. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on your show again, and hopefully it's been somewhat some good information in that couple of years that you've been watching. Interesting times, to say the least.
Yeah. So, one of the big trends I think that we're seeing right now is we're going to be moving increasingly from a want society that's with demand that is often driven times by want towards a need-based society. And that's where kind of resources come in, commodities come in, not only as hedges, but also as a prerequisite for a lot of the policies that are being implemented by governments worldwide in tandem as we see kind of a global governance structure rolled out. So namely, I'm talking about ESGs, for instance. A lot of these minerals and commodities will be needed to reach these goals without essentially collapsing Western civilization generally. And then also now they are oftentimes just needed in general. That's what we look at, like food, for instance, growing food, agriculture, etc. Obviously, we need to feed the people. So what's on your mind today, Chris?
Well, if only Joe Biden felt the same way. Yeah, it's shocking what I'm witnessing, to the degree that I'm wondering how much of what we see on any of these news channels is real, which is a fair question. Yet, at least on the surface of it, Joe Biden a couple of weeks ago, he's like in the State of the Union address saying, hey, this inflation, we're going to have a plan. We're on it. The Federal Reserve, these guys are top shelf economic savants. Then a couple of weeks later, it's Putin's fault. Sorry, but get ready for food shortages.
Get ready for food shortages. Yes.
I'll do my best to leave my feelings on that brand of leadership aside for the moment. But like you quite well pointed out, you have a lot of food. Apparently, wheat comes from Russia, comes from Ukraine. Palladium, see, those 40-50% comes from Russia. A lot of these, I think Russia is the 5th or 6th largest silver producer. A lot of resources that, at least I hear from people who make products, are in demand. So when you have a war to cut that off and say, like, all right, you can't use dollars to buy those things anymore, and Russia responds with saying, all right, well, here's how we're going to do our gold backing for the ruble, it seems like either people are going to stop using stuff, or if they want, I mean, that's what Europe is going through right now. It's like they want to heat their houses, get natural gas. So either they're going to follow Joe Biden's, wait, I'm sorry, we're not supposed to call it regime change. I get confused. I'm sorry. The current policy, don't listen to what Joe Biden says. Listen to what the White House's Twitter feed interprets Joe Biden's comments, even if he's reading a carefully prompted speech. So, a little confusing for me. But in the end, I mean, they told, they tried to get the whole world to boycott Russia. It seems like Europe is like, well, yeah, but we have a big problem if we do that. So how that's going to shake out and what that means when the alleged president of a alleged free world country is putting its own citizens' food supply at risk to not do regime change in Russia and protect the little bullies, or the little people in Ukraine, some of which seem to be going around acting like Nazis and doing training regimens with the CIA and US bases near the Russian border, which Joe hasn't commented on. But in the end, that seems to be more important than the citizens of the country Joe is allegedly ruling, eating food, having resources. And I mean, that's part of why I'm not in the US. It didn't feel safe before I left, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any safer right now. And maybe there's some secret food supply, or, the LME's got a big pile of nickel in the mountains somewhere that they're not telling us about, but at least, you know, if you look logically at the face of what's being reported, it's not ideal for many people.
I think we kind of dove in here at the recent kind of heart of the issue, and that is the food shortages. We saw 3 days ago President Biden say that food shortages are, quote, gonna be real. Let's take him at his words. So he said the shortage is, quote, gonna be real.
Did he actually say gonna be real? Like, it's like, yo, man, those food shortages, they're gonna be real. Is it like that? Or?
That's what the quote is. I mean, yeah, gonna be
did
real.
You see that other quote where he was like saying something weird where he's like, everyone has that buddy who, you know, their friend like has a picture of them in the shower with someone else. And I remember Dave Kranzler retweeted, he's like, nah, I don't know a buddy like that. So he says a lot of unusual things, but I apologize for interrupting. Continue, please.
Yeah, no problem. Saki then backtracked, right? We're not expecting a food shortage here at home. We're just expecting it in the Southern Hemisphere. No, she didn't say that. Let me back up. Saki stated, quote, we're not expecting a food shortage here at home, but we do anticipate that higher energy, fertilizer, wheat, and corn prices could impact the prices of growing and purchasing critical food supplies for countries around the world. Of course, there's all sorts of investing implications with this, Chris, like opportunities, for instance, in or not even investment, but even business opportunities. US made fertilizer is certainly one of them, seemingly. Now, let's see here. That is pretty much the quote. And it's tough to know, if that was accurate, if that's something that perhaps his staff told him that they believe could happen. It is all being blamed on the Ukraine crisis. So I think the issue there is that we've long seen weakness in the currencies and creeping unemployment rates, especially in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, which although since approximately like 2012, 2013, we've been recovering from with the world's largest bull market. I think in a lot of ways, Main Street did not feel the benefits of that. And now that at the end of that period, as we move into this kind of higher inflationary period, they're seeing a lot of their wealth being taken out. I think John Williams has the official inflation rate in the US at approximately 14%. I know I spoke with Fortuna Silver, and they're seeing in their cost of production something around approximately 20%. And of course, those in the metals are expecting that this will catch up to the precious metals, like we've seen in nickel as of late. Now, this long-term trend is really, and also let's not mince words here, the consolidation of the global food supply have kind of put us in the situation here where we could actually, and many already are, facing food shortages. The UN's been warning about a creepingly higher starvation rate since 2020. And I think they're saying that the Ukraine war will be abetting this, or rather worsening this problem. Now, my question, Chris, I suppose is, it makes sense that Europe is facing the brunt of this crisis, as you mentioned. So we're seeing what's going on in Europe. They maybe are feeling the increase of energy costs more. We do see, at the very least, is countries like Austria and Germany now moving towards essentially like rationing energy. I mean, that's wartime type decisions that are being made there. And over a longer term period, looking back at Europe, it's had a weaker economy, or rather not having world reserve currency status has certainly not given it the exorbitant privilege that we have. So when you look at the regulations that they have, the policies, how it's tough to do business there, and et cetera, we see kind of what many have predicted would be a weaker economy at this point of sort of, the unraveling, if you will, than the US. And so here we have the US kind of left standing with what has, up until Biden's comments when he said that Putin can't remain in power, had been a strong alliance, but there is kind of like some kind of wobbling going on there. Now, with all this in the background, like, can we
Wobbly Joe, that's what you get.
Can we assume that the food shortages are because of the war? I would not, but we're seeing headlines. Effects of food shortage because of war can already be seen at grocery stores. There's all sorts of economic decisions and that have been made over the last 2 years, which have kind of preceded this. Now, the first is what's going on is with this food shortage, we're seeing wheat prices are up 21% and barley is up 33%. The prices of fertilizer are already up 40%. Russia, let's see here, Russia and Ukraine make up more than 30% of the global wheat market and are considered the breadbasket of Europe. Now, Chris, what are the impacts of all these going to be? Like, what are you thinking? I know that you're kind of flabbergasted as everything unravels.
Well, I mean, it seems like the people making these decisions are more concerned about doing a war than taking care of the people they're supposed to protect. Because, it's one thing to say, all right, well, Putin is the new Hitler and he's just bullying on the little Ukraine. But I mean, why did he go in there? Why did Joe Biden? There's a lot of, the why is important in a lot of these things. And, but in the end, Joe Biden has chosen to do that and put the citizens at risk and say, you're on your own. It's Putin's fault. I have no plan and I'm busy doing other stuff. I'm not going to come up with a plan. So ironically, here's the best part is that, some of this stuff is beyond horrific and unfortunate, yet at the same time, I think the best hope for Americans and people around the globe is paradoxically at the exact same moment, Joe Biden, because he's like the silver investors put. You had the Greenspan put for equity investors. I mean, I wish someone would just like follow Joe Biden around with a camera, like, like reality show for like a day or two. And like, if we actually saw what the guy was doing when he's off camera, it's so guaranteed to like backfire at some point. I mean, think about it. He told Putin not to go into Russia, to Ukraine, or else he was going to be mad. So what did Putin do? He went into Ukraine. Then he told them, whatever's the next step, don't do this, or else we're going to sanction you. And what did Putin? He accelerated it. They sanctioned it. What did Putin do after that? I remember there was one report that they blew up some sort of base in Ukraine near Poland, where the CIA until February of this year had been doing training operations. So wait a second, Joe, what the CIA is doing training operations up till February? That's all of a sudden a little bit of a murkier story than just, Russia's going and picking on Ukraine. And if they have NATO building forces all around Russia, well, then if it's not, this, hey, Putin is Hitler. Now, Joe Biden, they say they have the evidence. His boy, Ned Flanders Price in the State Department, he keeps saying, and it's funny, one of the guys, the reporters was questioning, and they're like, well, Ned, outside of saying to trust you, you've not actually provided any evidence, which is similar to what, when Syria is using chemical weapons. John Kerry had the evidence. So how does this all tie together? I mean, well, if Joe Biden's lying his ass off, which we all know damn well is the case, I mean, the guy lies about everything, we're just starting to find out what his son Hunter's been doing and who's been getting pay for play things. A lot of stuff that these guys don't want to talk about, just like, what's his face? Benham at the CFTC doesn't want to talk about how the government has now acknowledged that there's a price cap on the silver market. Not my words. I'll show you the evidence. I tried showing the CFTC the evidence. They don't have any comment. None of the banks have any comments. So this isn't just some like humanitarian Joe out there saving it. And especially if that's not the case, that he's not defending the poor weakling from the big bully, that means all of this is bullshit. And on top of it, it's exposing Americans to these crises. Plus, think about the way people have had to live for the last 2.5 years now. Even if, I guess the positive is that there's some degree to which human, our instinct to stay alive, or instinct to be productive, the instinct for most people to live a positive life, share what they're good at, combine with another, work if they have to, do what needs to be to take care of their family. That's a powerful force that can even overcome Joe. Joe's not going to be the end of the planet. as shameful as it is that someone like him has even been allowed to influence things. I mean, the world's going to continue on. So it's like some of these things we'll figure out, but it's like just that people have been, it's already 2 years now they've had to be trapped inside their houses. And now when questions come out about, hey, like no one's asking like, well, where did this COVID thing come from? And we hear a lot of people, Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates have these labs. We hear there are similar labs in Ukraine. I read some articles that say that Putin was blowing up the labs where they're making things like COVID. But we can't get a straight answer. And when we can't catch Anthony Fauci lying, he just does it, he waits till Rand Paul's done talking with his 10 minutes and hopes no one will notice. Similar to how, we had things, weapons of mass destruction. Well, we never got an answer on that. They never appeared. No one was held accountable. And they die, hope the next Bush comes in power. And it's a lot of these things add up, especially as someone who was running from the dust cloud on September 11th. Another thing where the Bush family fingerprints highly involved. Yet it's like one is to cover up the next, and they're always busy covering up the last thing. And even if food supply is at risk, commodity supply is at risk. All right, the silver supply, we'll see when it shakes out. I don't know how long the government will be able to continue tamping down the silver price, in the words of Rustin Benham. But you already have the problem. Now we're just waiting for the Ponzi scheme to unfold, because at least at the current levels, if you want to go green or any of this stuff, which I personally, I think it's just never going to happen. But I mean, okay, Silver Institute says they're running a deficit the last 2 years. Where's that silver coming from? And it's like, unless you're pretty darn headstrong, I mean, how many people are going to start, if they actually knew the truth that the CFTC commissioner admitted that in the face of silver squeeze weekend, people were buying so much silver that these guys were scared. They took action to tamp down the silver price. He said this on camera, not me. So that confirms the government. Well, why are they so scared about the silver price? Apparently they know their dollar's in rough shape. He's the one who said he was scared and committed the market felony. This is the regulator tamping down the price. So he confirmed he was scared. He confirmed that he's price fixing the silver market. Now, a lot of us do damn well, because you have the plunge protection team, of which this same guy is a member. So the U.S. rigs a lot of markets. They just give themselves the authority to do it and say, we're going to shoot you if you try and do anything about it. So, there's a degree to which, if someone's walking around with a machine gun and starts shooting people, people knew who's guilty, but all right, go arrest them. Well, what are you going to do? There's the dynamics of the situation. That's what we have here. Things have been corrupted. And now, rather than say like, oh shit, now we're really exposing like what happens during war. I heard someone saying that often the deaths there's not as much death because of the actual killing, but it's like you bomb a hospital, or you bomb the the factory that makes insulin for the guy who's a diabetic. I heard a lot of people in the early days of COVID, when you couldn't get access to things, people weren't going into work. If someone has heart medication, all of a sudden they don't go without it and they got a heart attack from that. Okay, you can say a heart attack, but these are the things where when people are worried about all these things, when they're worried that this current alleged president has gotten things past if you thought the last bunch of presidents were bad, they've gotten past what we ever saw with the Cold War. So
it went like
you talk how, and you also said, how do people plan businesses, which was a great point. Are they supposed to do that?
There was a couple of days, like a few weeks ago, in which now we had, I won't remember everything that happened. However, one thing was that a drone ended up in Czech Republic or Poland or something. It flew through Poland and into another country and crashed, I guess, at like a college. And then we had India accidentally send a missile into Pakistan, I believe. And that meant or implies that they were even doing like drills, like doing wargaming out, a situation that involved them pointing these missiles into Pakistani territory.
Well, just to be clear, there's some stuff is not just implying. Victoria Nuland of the State Department, she had confirmed, this is Joe Biden's teammate, that there are biological laboratories doing something. So that's a part Joe didn't mention. So some of this stuff, we're guessing, but I'm sorry for interrupting, but there's some we're not.
The health labs, of course, the Pentagon run health labs. So, and then now I've watched about an hour or and a half or 2 hours worth of Putin speeches, and he touches on a lot of the stuff that we've touched here today. Quite frankly, he also touches on psychological campaigns that are being waged not only on people, not on people in Russia, but in people in the West as well. Now, there are some hints of truth in what is being laid out for his case. Now, that in no ways is a excuse of the invasion. It's absolutely an invasion. I think it's wrong on numerous levels and also strategically wrong as well. Look at what the sanctions have done. We saw the sanctions be instituted, essentially carving Russia out of the global economy. And then now we're kind of seeing a boomerang effect with all the prices going up, as we mentioned, and of course the rationing in Austria and Germany. So I guess, one thing we were talking about silver. Now we've seen there's very little coverage of silver markets in the press. You barely ever hear about it. In fact, I think in terms of at least what I see in Google News, the last time it was mentioned was 4 weeks ago by Insider. It was regarding UBS. Lightening up or rather raising its expectations, its silver forecast after last fall, saying that predicting that we would see further weakness. So in September 2021, UBS said that the silver price was looking weak. Now, as we kind of head into the summer of 2022 here, a riotous summer of 2022, they're saying that it's starting to look good. So any further thoughts on silver?
Well, I guess I'm finished. I'm going to finish giggling at the bank coverage of silver. I'm surprised some of these banks, can spell silver. I just imagine like, like on the trade floor, like, hey, Bob, what's that thing? Is sliver? It's up 8%. Oh, silver. Yeah, I like that they say it's looking good, it's looking bad, like it's like a beauty pageant, or they're at like the hog show, like it's what is it? It's what is silver looking like? It looks like a bar of silver. Now, I mean, looking good, looking bad. I love these explanations they come up with. You know, I mean, I see the headlines. Well, the Fed's going to raise interest rates, so silver got slammed $1 today. Well, what about when silver was at $50, or even when it was down at $30, and the Fed kept promising they were going to raise interest rates? Never happened. I mean, the balance sheet's above 9 trillion. It was 800. It was under 900 billion right when the Lehman thing hit. So it was under 1 trillion. Silver spiked up, because you're printing money. So if you think about it like this, at least in a somewhat, well-functioning economy, if you have only good as 100 apples and you have $100, how much is each apple is going to be worth $1, right? But let's say, the crazy Ben Bernanke of your island comes along and is like, hey, well, let's get, we got 100 little greenbacks here. Why not make 2? That's fine. But if the only thing you can buy is your apple, the price is going to sort to 2, at least, when you're not, lying about the numbers or the supply, which I factor in, it's, I mean, even any of these numbers now, it's like, holy Christ. I mean, how much of any of this is real? But so here you have the money supply has gone up from under 900 billion to over 9 trillion. I think it's 9 trillion, 8 trillion, 9 trillion. It's like, it's a lot. So where was the silver was $50? Shouldn't it be, if that's 10x in the money supply, just according to basic, if you had natural supply and demand functioning, all right, if there's 10 times more money, at least by that one measure. Now, I would assert there's probably far in excess of 10 times more money in the last decade. We're now 14 years since 2008, 15 years since 2007, when a lot of this really started to unravel, similar to how we're seeing, if you're looking, you can see the signs of things happening now. Yet silver just seems to be the only asset that goes down. I mean, stock market soaring in the face of rising interest rates. I mean, some of these companies are not going to be selling their TikTok and Bumble services to Russians anymore. So it seems like they lost some customers, and their other customers are getting a big cut out of their paycheck for increased gas prices. So I don't know whether UBS thinks that looks good or bad. I mean, they make their assumptions based on the latest CNBC headline and how they interpret it, which seems rather silly to me. I mean, if we're looking at any of the sets of numbers show that the market's in a deficit. The money supply, despite what the Fed says, has been hyperinflated. Bitcoin went from $1 to 60,000 or 45,000, whatever it is now, in a decade. Even gold, which hit its peak 850 in 1980, is keeps going up past 2,000 until you see the same type of trading activity, which J.P. Morgan got fined $920 million for, crashing the thing down. Maybe the next time we talk, I'll tell you what happened as I presented the evidence to lawyers, where basically people know what's going on. It's like that situation where the guy's out there shooting the financial machine gun, just like Joe Biden. We know what's happening. We know how corrupt it is, but right now, so how does it look? Well, currently, Commissioner Benham has price capped the silver market at $30. So we'll see how long that goes on for. Either he'll change his mind. You'd think on one hand, given the debt's crossed 30 trillion, it's clear they're not going to pay it back. How much longer are they going to lie to their constituents, pretend they're going to pay it back while Nancy Pelosi and her buddies 2 weeks ago, to save the Ukrainians, they did a $1.5 trillion package, and an already bankrupt government, and had more pork than the hog farm. So if the silver market's in a deficit, where's the silver coming from? And now if projects aren't going online, and even if you put projects online to get the additional silver, it's going to take you like 10 years. So now people are going to be using less electronics, less computers. You're not going to have your green revolution. So Joe Biden can talk about his electric cars. It's great. It's like Obama and his windmills. It's like, like Jabba the Hutt says, well, I decree that I'm going to make everyone close their eyes until I lose 300 pounds. All right, great. You can try that. But, that's essentially the Joe Biden economic plan. And the best thing that Americans and people around the globe, who unfortunately is everyone who's tied to this ridiculous reserve currency, their best hope is that the sooner these guys are exposed for that, they're not beyond criminal, but complete absolute fools and morons. Just like the lowest of intelligence that can only get by when you're cheating and lying to people, which has done horrific damage. Yet at least, once you get these fools out of the way and something, if you just put a basketball in the White House and Joe Biden went out, just send him fishing, leave a basketball or a pet rock. That would be the greatest event. That would be the most productive, positive event in the history of the United States, better than the Constitution. Replace Joe Biden with a basketball. That's the solution.
All right. You mentioned I'm looking at the economic news. It's interesting.
Is that fair, Justin? Is that, I'm going overboard, or is that reasonable at this point?
We're on YouTube.
That's how to fix America, man. That's how you do it.
Yeah, I think fixing America is actually a discussion. You brought this up, and I want to talk about that. Fixing America, fixing the world is a really good topic, and we could talk about that kind of for the next 25 minutes as we wrap this up. And I do, before that, want to discuss a little bit about the history of Japan, particularly a period known as the Lost Decades. So I'll read what Wikipedia has to say about them. Now, the Lost Decades refers to a period of economic stagnation in Japan caused by the asset price bubble's collapse in late 1991. The term originally referred to the years from 1991 to 2001, but the decade from 2001 to 2011 lost 20 years, and the decade from 2011 to 2021 have also been included by commentators. And now here we are in 2022. From 1991 to 2003, the Japanese economy, as measured by GDP, grew only 1.14% annually, while average real growth rate between 2000 and to 2010 was about 1%, both well below other industrialized nations. Debt levels continued to rise in response to the global financial crisis and Great Recession in 2008, the earthquake and tsunami and Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, and the COVID-19 pandemic. The subsequent recession in 2020 further damaged the Japanese economy. Broadly impacting the entire Japanese economy over the period of 1995 to 2007, GDP fell from 4.33 trillion to 4.36 trillion in nominal terms. Real wages fell around 5%, while the country experienced at a stagnant price level. While there is some debate on the extent and measurement of Japan's setbacks, the economic effect of the lost decades is well established, and the Japanese policymakers continue to grapple with its consequences to little economic effect. Now, starting with kind of the discussion of the debt levels here in Japan, debt levels continue to rise throughout this crisis. I think we can really see a precursor to what the West will now experience and is now experiencing. Of course, the global financial crisis and Great Recession in 2008 affected the entire globe, and that includes the West. So that could be included in our timeline. But then largely on the back of, I guess, the money printing and the propping up of stocks and equities and I guess money printing, the West saw on the back of the US dollar a period of growth. What's been termed, I don't know if this is true, the largest bull market in history. However, a roaring 20s type decade nonetheless. And then the Great Lockdown.
By the way, those Roaring Twenties came right after. Oh yeah, the Fed was invented in 1913. So their price stability. I mean, right to start being great right from the beginning. They didn't even wait until like a few decades to establish their expertise. So keep that in mind.
Great point. Now, global financial crisis, and then the Great Lockdown, what the IMF termed the Great Lockdown, obviously a huge impact, further money printing, further debt, right? And now we've got, I guess, I suppose the Ukraine war very well might be what's next on this list, but now we're having a series of incidences with an underlying lack of growth and weakness, particularly, I guess, in the West generally, economically. And I think the West is already, 2 years into its lost decades. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, maybe there's some tendency to always think that in the olden days they were a lot wiser and smarter. And although, gee, it sure seems. Maybe if you marked it from, not that there aren't other places to mark it from, but the whole September 9th or September 11th in 2001. So, I mean, from the standpoint of something happened to America that day, and why I think it's still significant, keep in mind the Bush family. They were longtime business partners with the Bin Ladens. Papa Bush having a meeting with the Bin Ladens even the morning of September 11th. Somehow they flew out. They were given a pass to fly out. I'm guessing many people are not aware that Salam Bin Laden, I believe was Osama's older brother, is also business partners with the Bush family, had a mysterious death in a flying accident a couple of years before in San Antonio, which seems like, an event this big, I don't know, somebody aside from me and you think would have been interested in some of those connections rather than just saying, oh, we know who did it, let's not do an investigation. Because, if things aren't exactly as we were told, where just, the Bush business partners orchestrated this whole thing, which sounds kind of bad right off the bat there, let alone, what's his name? Rumsfeld, who said the Pentagon lost $2.3 trillion on September 10th of 2001. And now he's dead. So
I've got that pulled up. I've got that pulled up right now. I already was on top of that. Rumsfeld said, quote, "The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector, but not ours. Not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track 2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it is stored on dozens of technological systems that are inaccessible or incompatible."
So here's the thing. I know Nancy Pelosi, I keep reading these reports of what a genius options trader she is and how on a government salary, she has some large number of millions of dollars, which, it seems difficult for many to understand how that was obtained through legal integral methods with integrity, yet My guess is if the money in her option account just disappeared and they lost it, I mean, we see what she does when she's even concerned about COVID and what she forces other people to do without really knowing much about the substance that she forced people against their will to take, use leverage to financially make companies make it a mandate. So we see how concerned she was with that. I'll bet you would be concerned if the money disappeared from her account. You had $2.3 trillion, a number which I might add has grown substantially since then. Yet nobody seems concerned when it's someone else's money. These people continue to be rewarded. It sure looks like theft. And now you have the people who speak up, and I mean, there was even, you can see on YouTube still, there's the guy that, one of the auditors, and he was like, when I pointed this out, they're like, dude, why are you doing this? Why? It's like, so I was stunned. I'm like, I'm doing my job. I found like 2 trillion missing dollars. And it's just like one comes in, he dies. The next guy comes in. Now, keep in mind, here's a fun one. If you want, I'll dig up the link for this. I can't say for sure if it's true. Seems more plausible than the government history I've read. But if you wonder why September 11th in particular, at least the story around the Black Eagle Trust Fund, not the nicest entity. A lot of gold from World War II. Where did that go? Black Eagle Trust Fund. Name pops around it. And remember back in 1991, that was when the elder Bush was in power. And at least what I have read was the Black Eagle Trust Fund, $200 billion of bonds that came due on what day? Oh, yes, September 11th, 2001. They were taken out September 11th, 1991. And basically, they were going to need to be cleared. Who clears them? The Federal Reserve. What happened to the Federal Reserve on September 11th? They basically went to a blank check policy for the good of the financial system. Anything we got to do, clear it. And how gold and silver went missing, even reported by CNN from under the building, allegedly even before the attacks happened. That's another story that people would have a better shot of figuring out by watching Die Hard with a Vengeance than any sort of government regulator. But also on September 11th, Cantor Fitzgerald Eurobrokers, they're the ones keeping the brokerage records, blown up in the Trade Center. The group that was actually investigating this stuff with the Bush family, that was the Department of Naval Affairs, happened to be blown up in the Pentagon. So basically, money gets stolen, things go bad, wars are lied about, things blow up in investigations. Then it carries forward. You have all of these things happening, and it's like all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, this isn't the land of the free anymore. Now you've had almost anyone who's had integrity and has excelled in their career in the past 20. If you didn't act like a frat boy Bush family member and do what makes the quick buck, look at what's happened with Wall Street. Look at the medical industry. Like you don't become a doctor by healing people. You go to Harvard. Your parents say, pay attention here. You get the answer they say. Psychiatric industry. Oh, great. I heard they updated the DSM-5. Oh, I heard they put a new government in the psychiatric manual, which is kind of like the Federal Reserve of psychiatry. And it's like a new condition that if someone is sad about the loss of a loved one, even a year later, that's now Sadinkalia or whatever. And here's the Pfizer drug you take for that. So yeah, there's been a lot of things that have been corrupted in these last 20 years, and you're seeing the effects of this. I was living in Denver. In the last couple of years, I've lived in Denver and also Austin. These are supposedly the thriving
Don't get me started on Denver. No, I'm just kidding. Please continue.
I mean, it was just shocking to me that right after COVID hit, not only did you have tent cities in downtown Denver, like the areas where the 20-year-old kids are going out, the girls are wearing mini skirts and everyone's partying. I mean, you have people sleeping in tents. These aren't good economic times, but then that started spreading, because it's like right outside of the downtown, there's residential areas where, it's like, these are where the people are paying for the housing bubble condos in Denver so they can live close to the town because the prices are going up because the Fed's inflating a real estate bubble. Hey, but now I'm looking at there's tents outside, which, hey, not to belittle someone in tent, but just like these aren't good situations. And I go down to Austin, it's the same thing. And it's like you've seen. And it's like I've gone to other countries and I see the effects of it where they're looking back to American media. Here in Mexico, they're wearing the mask if Anthony Fauci has a policy. to wear the mask. So you have all these pillars of alleged leadership that have been doing broad day bank robberies, which, yeah, like, it leaves in a position where it's not the easiest of times, and certainly not for the faint of heart. And I understand it's a lot easier for many people to say, like, it's too much to handle, and I certainly feel that way at times as well. But I guess at the end of the day, going back to at least my time on the earth, at least if I see something wrong, speak up about it. And perhaps even more important than that, or even silver, is what steps can you take? I think it's unfortunate what Joe Biden is doing, or what a lot of these guys have done. But all right, how can there's still, hey, the sun's shining, I'm healthy, I'm in one piece. Does government make things harder? Yes, but do I think the more that you can be aware and process, yet but productively move forward and say, all right, this doesn't seem the way I would have chosen it, but we're here, what do we do? And I think when you do that, that's when, at least in my own life, I've seen directly where at times I'm like, I don't know, I'm never going to figure my way out through this one yet. You do. And I think the more that people are able to embrace that going forward, the easier time they'll have navigating through the things that are going on.
We started this talk regarding what we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia, and the food shortages that we see. We, in this article from yesterday in Time Magazine, can see that the UN food chief warned Tuesday that the war in Ukraine has created a, quote, catastrophe on top of a catastrophe, and will have global impact beyond anything we've seen since World War II. That's David Beasley. He said something similar after the lockdowns. He is the executive director of the UN World Food Program. He's mentioned he noted that the high food prices, which are still skyrocketing. Now, we also, though, have, for instance, an Australian senator walking into parliament and talking about essentially elitism, the super class, as Newsweek has called them, a 6,000 person super class, essentially a ruling class. And more specifically, the Australian senator from South Australia mentioned Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum. Now, he specifically also he mentioned the own nothing, be happy mantra, which he referred to as communism. Unlike, I take an optimistic view. I think that this is just a struggle that is part of the human condition, and it's been ongoing for centuries. And the fact that here we are in 2022 and we still have, capability for some of us at least to have freedom of thought, and the lives that we've experienced up till now, for many of us, especially in the West and in countries everywhere, in Mexico there. I remember going to Tijuana from San Diego and having the time of my life not too long ago. And therefore I'm more optimistic. So I think let's talk, while we got a little bit of time left, about what solutions that we can do collectively. So things that come to my mind are like forming networks, learning skills ourselves, like even if that's just how to grow a simple garden. It's really just a matter of growing the simple garden. Alternative communication networks, right? So that starts with the alternatives to the apps that we're all using today. I think that some that come to mind are Keybase. Another one is, I think, Status Messenger app. Now, these are like the alternative to the alternatives. And that, I think, is where we need to go. There's another company called Purism Laptops, pure.ism, not cheap, but they are an alternative, hardware and everything, and even a different optionality in terms of function than the Apples and the Microsofts of the world, the PCs and the Macs.
So is that something? I've actually been wanting to get a new computer that doesn't spy on me. Is that something I want to look into?
That's the idea. Pure.ism. That's the idea. Great company, as far as I can tell. Ham radio, learning ham radio. That's another, I think, important skill that I don't have that is important to have. CPR, learning. We should take first aid classes ourselves. We need food, though, first and foremost, also. So we need to be self-sustaining and independent. And now that stuff's all obvious and it's talked about quite often. I think also, I guess, being being more unified in vision and working together, so that like all these influencers on YouTube, Chris, right? The Economic Ninja, Chris Taylor, Arcadia Economics, Gold Silver Bitcoin, and name a few.
Oh, well, there's Kranzler out there, Investment Research Dynamics, Rob Keynes, Gold Silver Pros, and Rafi Farber, who has a great channel. And yeah, I think what you're saying about you nailed it in the beginning there with the network, because part of it comes in. It's like you listed a bunch of those skills that are handy to have: growing food, CPR. Yet I think that's where a lot of people get overwhelmed. I know I had a tendency to do that, where it's like, oh shit, I got to do all this. I got to, I mean, the way my life has gone, I'm kind of wandering, or not wandering around Mexico, but trying to find the right place for me to feel safe, at least for a while, as things develop in the world. And so maybe I don't have as much, like a whole basement full of food in case something happens with the supply line. But I have a large network of people, and I have different people I can contact. And I've been, I like to bring, hey, here's the guy that maybe he just decided he want to go back to his corporate employer, but I know Bill over here who's looking for someone who's got entrepreneurial skills. You can say like, hey, I got this, you can take it and run with it. So I mean, it's like some balance of figuring out what it is that you like to do. I mean, for maybe some, like you said, Morse code was an interesting one. Some people that's a terrible thing for them to be doing, but other people that's the right thing. So I think it's a balance of finding, let's say we weren't in New York or corporate America, or what many of us know or see on TV, but you're in a local community where, fine, maybe the grid went down, and hey, these guys over there, they got the food thing down, and maybe you help out an hour a day in the garden or something. But if you're a musician and you just create music, well, that helps people calm down, or in the morning or for the evening. And everyone, I think that's really the whole point of, not even point of, that's what an economy is. Not this Wall Street matrix financial system, which is, I mean, it's great for the people running it. I mean, they get to steal all the stuff, and do we have to be bound to it? No. I mean, a lot of it has really been the mental conditioning, which makes people feel, dependent, on the government crutch, where they come along, they break your knee, offer you the crutch. And if you ever stop taking it, they break your knee again. So you feel like, well, I always need them. Yeah, I mean, I think silver will come in handy. I think, other things will come in handy, but really, I don't know, maybe if you're on a desert island with, 10 people or something, the silver's not going to be as important. But the idea of, hey, getting away from, oh, well, there's no opportunity because there's not job postings on Monster. If you look around and say like, all right, I see there's an issue here with the food thing, and maybe you get together with a bunch of your friends and say, hey, for our town here, we're going to start this garden. You make a petition and let people know, hey, we see the stuff that's going on in Ukraine. They say there's going to be a food issue. So, there's 10 of us here. We know how to grow food. We talk to all the people. We'll make sure we have food for everyone. Here's how much, here's you can support. Maybe some people give money. You have, I think it's often for young people. And when, we're in the stage of life, we don't have as much capital. You often think that's the way the world is, but hey, there's people who are 80, 90, going to pass away that want to leave the world a better place, which, just the process of thinking through what is needed and getting out of that. Well, because the government says the economy's bad, there's stuff that needs to be fixed all over. And the more that, I would say, start there even before investments or anything else. And that's probably what would be helpful, hopefully.
All right, tell us about Mexico just briefly. Why? Okay, I'll start. Now, AMLO was an interesting candidate. He's been a lifelong socialist. I saw him playing baseball on Facebook often, and that got me interested. And he played it all the time, and I was like, this guy really likes baseball, or he maybe likes American values. I can't really tell. Of course, for those watching you, they're interested in the mining sector. They've been hearing that it's been a tough time now for miners in Mexico. That is lamentable. Now, however, and for instance, I want to ask you one question. I want to prioritize this. So you actually you had a big story recently on Fortuna Silver, who's had some issues in the South that they resolved in December. quite quickly. On the environmental front, so environmentalists were not happy with them and kind of forced their hand, but they resolved that with the officials there. You broke a story recently on Fortuna Silver, how their share price, their stock price was not behaving as one would expect based on their revenue earnings. Can you kind of tell the people what happened there and what your thoughts are on it?
Well, they've had a couple of weird things where there was that issue a couple of months back. I guess there was a permit which they had, done all the steps to make sure was going to happen, and then the government said you didn't. Although they had the confirmation that the step the government was saying they didn't, they had done. I hope I'm getting those details exactly correct. It was a couple months back, but I mean the thing got hammered nonetheless. And they had their earnings report last week. They got, seemingly was a good result, although it seems like someone reported they lost $59 million rather than made $59 million. And in the end, it seems like the silver stocks go in the opposite direction of anything that would seem logical. I mean, in a market where even with interest rates going up, the regular stock market's up a couple hundred points every day. So, I think it's one of those situations if people are getting into silver, I would say it's worthwhile to be prepared for the long term, because you're going to see a lot. If you're expecting silver stocks or the silver price to react, the way you think it should based on the news that comes out that day, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. But at least to me, when I look at the money printing that's going on and the government price cap, which they only tell their friends at the banks, who they then fine and just let them do it again, that's concerning. But I mean, it's you would think at some point then you're going to head towards an issue in the silver supply. So but not expecting it to be priced in on the day that you think it should is something to keep in mind there.
We've had the honor and privilege of sitting down today with Chris Marcus of Arcadia Economics, which you can find on YouTube. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today.
Thanks, Justin. Always great talking with you, and appreciate being on the show again.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.